Hello, I want to talk to you about the conspiracy of bureaucracy, the conspiracy that is bureaucracy. Many people come up against bureaucratic intransigence, stonewalling, and some of them, understandably frustrated, talk about conspiracy. It's a conspiracy, and of course once you're branded a conspiracy theorist you can be written off as a crank. If you can hear a noise in the background, it's peeping, it's my smoke alarm. I've got no control over that, and nor a creaking table unless I decide not to lean on it. Alright, I'll illustrate this with something fairly non-controversial. In 2001 I set up a website about a murder. God, 2000, was it really? 22 years ago nearly. It was April 19, 2001. Basically the story is this. In 1986 a man named Clark Pierce was murdered in a Birmingham restaurant by a scumbag named Satpal Ram. Ram stabbed him in the back, gloated over him as he lay dying, then fled the scene of the crime with a knife still in his hand. He disappeared for 8 days, gave himself up to a police station, was charged with murder, convicted, given a life sentence. Sometime later, his supporters, dishonest to a man and woman, especially one woman I can think of, started a massive campaign, and of course it was all racism, yada 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 yada. Ram had 2 appeals, one of which was dismissed at the leave stage, and the second of which was eviscerated by Lord Justice Kennedy. Correction, the first was eviscerated by Lord Justice Kennedy. The second, which went to the full court, Lord Justice Beldam presided over it. It was, excuse me the warning, but as usual, it's well after midnight. There was evidence given at this second appeal, and the court still said no. Eventually this scumbag was paroled. He was at large for, he was at liberty for about a year before he was called to prison. Eventually he was arrested. He was arrested in London, during which process he assaulted 2 police officers. Before I set up the website, in the process of setting it up, I had some correspondence which was very one-sided. I'll read here from an article I wrote called "How a Conspiracy of Silence Aids the Lives of Satpal Ram." You can read the full article on the website. Anyway, this was like this. I wrote to who did I write to first? Paul Boateng. Well, first of all I tried to flog a story to the media. I tried the Daily Mail, didn't want to know. Somebody else, I think it was the Telegraph, eventually had a version of it published by the British National Party, which I don't know if it still exists, but I was on fairly good terms with Nick Griffin at one point. They published the article with their own agenda, own slant on it, edited it severely in other words. But I wrote to Paul Boateng, who was then prison minister, and he ignored me. I wrote to him again, and again I was ignored. The third time I delivered the letter by hand to the Palace of Westminster. At that time security wasn't as absurd as it is, well, as intense as it is now. I do apologise for the yawning. I hope I'm not making you yawn. Anyway, I did it in person, and again I was ignored. His son now, I believe, has been convicted of rape, so great karma a bitch. Anyway, I wrote to my MP, who was at that time was Jackie Lay, who was a very good MP, as was my previous MP, the late Piers Merchant, Diamond Geezer. She wrote to the Home Office, was delayed, And there was a replied, Lord Batham of Brighton replied, and he replied to a question I hadn't asked. I wrote to Home Office again in June 2001, no reply. I wrote again on August the 2nd, 2001. By this time the website had been set up. I've been a few updates. When that was ignored, I phoned the Home Office, and that was at the end of August, and I was told Lord Batham doesn't work here anymore. And Beverly Hughes was now in charge of prisoners. I phoned the Home Office on the 28th of September when I spoke to a press officer, Nicole Malabry, I think that's pronounced like that. She sounded helpful but wasn't helpful. She confirmed that my correspondence had been received, said something had gone astray. The points I raised would be answered. I phoned again on October 10th, spoke to her again. This time she passed it over to another civil servant, a guy named John Harper. I spoke to him at some point and he sounded very nervous, and I wrote in his essay, anyone would have thought he was being questioned by the police about the suspicious death of a wealthy aunt rather than being asked to respond to a routine inquiry. He said Alison Ramsey, whoever she was now dealing with it. She wasn't available and nothing happened, basically. I wrote to Denise Astley of the West Midlands Probation Service, sent her a fax. She claimed not to have received it, but she obviously had. She'd actually been in touch with Nadine O'Neill, the sister of Clark Pierce, who actually saw him murdered. She saw her brother murdered. She, her husband, and there were 6 people in their party who were dining, and it's obviously a terrible thing. She was told that Ram would be released. Anyway, this is what happens with bureaucracy. Bear in mind, this is something which is non-controversial. There's absolutely nothing controversial about Ram's conviction for murder, nothing at all. But it's not as though it's a matter of national security. I was asking questions about a guy who was convicted of murder, rightly was protesting his innocence and claimed he'd been beaten up at yada 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 by prison officers. And they just stonewalled me to death. I had this before with bureaucracies, government bureaucracies. I had it recently with a company. I won't say too much about it, but I've had a lot of contact with them in the past. They've been extremely helpful, but this time over a slightly different matter. I was getting sent around in circles, basically. This is the way bureaucracies operate. Nobody's responsible. Nobody's ever responsible. Occasionally somebody will be sacked, but usually they fail upwards. If this is what the Home Office is like over some trivial matter, you can imagine what governments are like when it comes to matters of national security. Anything that might reflect badly on the government, and so on. And at the moment we're seeing this in particular with the American government, the Bidens, who are, Joe Biden and his son, who is corrupt as hell. Everybody's stonewalling. This guy is one of the biggest crooks who's ever aspired to any political office, and nobody will do anything about it, and that was after all the hell they put Donald Trump and everyone associated with him through. This is the way bureaucracies. Obviously there are other angles here. You've got this Democratic establishment, or the Uniparty, and when Trump came in, they were all afraid of being sacked because he said he was going to cut down the bureaucracy massively and stop this American so-called imperialism. And they, these people don't even have to know each other to act like this. They just treat the public with contempt. We can see in the United States they're treating Republican politicians, powerful Republican politicians, with contempt. So whenever you hear the word conspiracy theorist, anytime somebody calls you a conspiracy theorist, Well, aren't conspiracies real? Wasn't Julius Caesar the victim of a conspiracy? We heard of the Ridolfi plot, the Babington plot, the Throckmorton plot. What about the gunpowder plot? Did Guy Fawkes plant all that gunpowder on his own? No, it was a conspiracy. And this is what bureaucracy is, a conspiracy against the public, and in their own defence, as it were. Totally incestuous. So again, anytime you come up against this sort of thing, and somebody calls you a conspiracy theorist, you know what to reply.